Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Big T Anderson, and this is another fanfiction reading. This is a Mercenary award now. This is from Gravity Tales. The author, now this is Chinese, I believe it translates to something like Accommodating Water's Will. Translator is Kevin1782. I will have links down below. What I will do is read the first chapter. So if you enjoy it and you want to go, hey, I want to hear more about that, I want to get more of the flavor of that story, you know, hit the links down below, go for it. So, let's begin. This is a mercenary's war. Gao Yang's body was being tossed around like a rag doll before his seatbelt promptly pulled him back into his seat. Other than seeing the non-stop flashes of lightning from the airplane's window, Gao Yang could hear the cloudburst hitting the body of the plane, accompanied by the booming thunder. Even worse, this shitty plane was at least 20 years old. These factors combined made Gao Yang feel regret for the first time since his decision to go to Africa. The worn-out plane managed to somehow get caught in this god-forsaken weather, making Gao Yang feel like his 23-year-long life might come to an end. Strangely, he wasn't panicked at all. In fact, he was trying to figure out exactly where they were, or rather, where they were in the sky. If he were to die, at the very least, he should find out where he was going to die. Gao Yang turned his head, intending to ask the tour guide beside him if he knew their current location. Unfortunately, Gao Yang immediately gave up on the idea as the tour guide was furiously drawing a cross on his chest and yelling out prayers. He decided it was best not to disturb him. Everything was in chaos inside the 20-cabin plane as everyone was in a frenzy. Two of the hunting company staff members was initially consoling everyone, and they were now crying louder than the rest of the passengers. Gao Yang was currently the most cool-headed in the aircraft cabin, but his composure didn't last for long. All sorts of feelings rushed at him at once. It was fear, despair, remorse. Especially once Gao Yang thought about his parents. Finally, he involuntarily let out just a bitter cry. The thing that Gao Yang was most afraid of was not the impending doom, but rather the pain his parents would feel having to endure after his death. Time seemed to pass by excruciatingly slowly as they approached death's doorsteps, so slow that it allowed people to reflect on their entire lives. He was currently experiencing exactly that as his 23-year-old life's events were flashing by in his eyes like a movie, and while he was reminiscing, the plane's altitude dropped lower and lower, and after a huge jolt, the head of the plane started plummeting downwards. When the lights in the cabin suddenly switched off, Gao Yang mustered all of his strength to curl up into a ball, with two hands protecting the back of his head. And after a dreadfully loud crash, he abruptly face-planted into the chair in front of him. The impact left him completely dazed. Both his shoulders and his stomach were pulled back by the seatbelt in one powerful jerk. It was as if he was getting cut in half. It made him feel closer to death. His eyes were squeezed shut, but after the sharp pain, he was sensing that he was submerged in something chilly, and immediately realized it was in water. He held his breath instinctively. A few moments later, he realized that he wasn't dead yet. The plane fell into the water, and he knew he had to head up to the surface. He opened his eyes, even though it was very dark, and with the help of a flashlight, he was still able to see vague outlines of shapes underwater. The plane broke into two pieces, and the split happened right above Gao Yang's head. He tried to unbuckle his seatbelt, but he couldn't find the release clutch. Time was ticking away. Just when Gao Yang was almost out of breath, he suddenly remembered that the tour guide carried a hunting knife on his waist. He reached out with his left hand to find the tour guide's arm. Moving his hand downwards, he finally found the knife handle, and after drawing it, he severed the seatbelt. Gao Yang resisted the urge to head up and reached out to the tour guide. He wanted to cut out the seatbelt just as well as the tour guide, but he immediately gave up on saving him, seeing his open skull. Instead, reaching underneath, grabbing a life jacket, and kicking his legs, he floated his way back up to the surface. He finally reached it, gasping for air, and he immediately put on the life jacket. Pulling the attached rope, he felt it inflate. and gave a big sigh of relief. Nobody would have imagined that a regular plane like theirs would fall into water. It was so unrealistic to the point that no one else had thought to grab the life jacket underneath their seat. And even in a hectic situation, Gao Yang didn't forget to take out the life jacket. Thankfully, it was still in good point that no one else had thought. But what to do next, he was completely bewildered. Even though it was still the middle of the day, due to the howling winds and heavy rainfall, it was as dark as night. In addition, the rainstorm made it impossible to see where shore was. As the rain was continuously splashing across the surface, his only wish was to find a place to get to shore, but he had no idea which direction to swim. And feeling a bit of panic, he just randomly chose a direction, started to swim with all of his might. However, he soon realized every time he kicked his leg, he felt a piercing pain in his left knee. Furthermore, even if the life jacket was providing him buoyancy, he didn't have any energy to swim. Without much choice, he stopped his attempt in swimming to the shore and decided to float in the water to rest. It was at the moment he discovered that he was being pushed by a current. The current signaled that he was in a river and not a lake, making him feel considerably more at ease. By drifting with the current and using minimal energy to swim at an angle, he'd be able to reach the shore. The new discovery made Gao Yang release a huge sigh of relief. He then found that he was still holding the knife tightly within his hands, a necessary item to survive in the wilderness. However, he couldn't hold the knife since it would interfere with his swimming, and not wanting to lose it, he stuck it in his belt and then fastened it tighter around his waist. He wanted to rest before attempting to approach the shore, except he didn't get to rest long enough before hearing an ominous burst of gunfire. He stretched out his neck to take a look and was alarmed to discover that somewhere up ahead was a huge foggy area. The fog indicated that there was either a waterfall or dangerous rapids, and either of these places would be fatal to Gao Yang in his current condition. Furiously swearing, he paddled with his life on the line, hoping to reach the shore before arriving in the danger zone. However, with his current strength, he couldn't go against the rising water flow. And finally, he was washed down a waterfall. Luckily, it wasn't too steep, and Gao Yang only choked on some water. Coming out of it dazed, he realized he could see both sides of the river. Ironically, seeing the shore now led Gao Yang to feel that it was a bad omen. The shore signified that the river channel was becoming narrower and the current would be more turbulent. In addition, there were so many reefs that the whole river was filled with life-threatening obstacles. At the point, he completely ignored the pain from his left knee and used both his hands and legs to avoid the reefs at all costs. Although, eventually, his luck ran out. He rammed into a huge reef. Everything went pitch black. An unknown amount of time passed before he finally opened his eyes. He felt sharp pains throughout his entire body, making him feel helpless and that it was better off being dead than alive. Once he became a bit more aware of his surroundings, he discovered he was actually only 4 to 5 meters away from the shoreline. And more importantly, he could actually touch the soft mud bed of the river with his feet. Suddenly filled with hope, he felt a surge of energy from within. Utilizing all his limbs, he crawled up the shore with much difficulty. His upper torso was out of the water. He took a half-hour break, pulled himself out the rest of the way, and once he was on land, he felt tired as fuck. Not only was he exhausted, but he was hungry, so terribly hungry. Gao Yang knew, even though he managed to survive the plane crash by pure luck, danger was still imminent, as this was Africa. And in Africa's wilderness, being eaten by a wild animal wouldn't even be acknowledged by the news since it was such a common occurrence. Taking in the surroundings, he found out that he was in the savannah. There was grasslands as far as one could see, with huge trees sprinkled here and there. The sun was close to the horizon, so Gao Yang didn't know if it was morning or evening because he couldn't figure out which direction was which. After taking a quick glance around, he did some quick exercise and realized his body condition wasn't as bad as he thought other than his left knee. Fortunately, the bone was alright. It was just an outer wound. He felt a dull ache throughout the rest of the body, but other than that, he wasn't really hurt. Giving himself a sigh of relief, knowing he didn't have a major injury, he started inspecting his personal belongings. Being a military enthusiast and a veteran backpacker, he had a habit of bringing his PSK around no matter what, making it a major benefit for his current situation. The so-called PSK was the English abbreviation for a personal survival kit. As a military enthusiast and a wilderness survival show addict, He carried the fanny pack around his waist all year round, even though he was sometimes labeled as delusional. His persistence had finally paid off. The only thing he regretted was that it was small for the sake of portability. Before leaving for Africa, he had chosen specific items that weren't too useful for his current situation. His PSK contained 2 big bars of chocolate, a fire stick, a compass, magnifying glass, 10 meters of paracord, 5 fish hooks, 10 meters of fishing line, a survival whistle, 4 condoms, and a first aid kit. Originally, it had made way more, but because he was flying by airplane, he could only bring his knife, lighter, and other related items in his carry-on. Luckily, he obtained a knife by the tour guide, one of the most important items for survival in the outdoors. An essential high-calorie outdoor perishables, the 2 giant chocolate bars were currently the most important possessions, and while he nibbled on them, he felt an urge to cry. He didn't dare to eat all of the chocolate, and only devoured one of them. If he weren't so hungry, he would have only eaten a few small pieces. He knew while he couldn't find food, these 2 bars of chocolate were lifesavers. And after he finished eating and was waiting for his strength to recover, he closely examined the knife he got from the tour guide in order to calm his mind. The knife's craftsmanship was of high caliber, and with one look, one could tell it was handmade. It was about 32 centimeters in length and around 5 in thickness. It had a teardrop-shaped tip with its body sharpened over a large surface area, a brass handle made from desert metal, and an extremely beautiful wood. The most exquisite part was the knife's Hammond-styled edge. Gao Yang was also delighted to know that the knife was made of carbon steel instead of stainless. This was because the majority of stainless steel products are crappy, mass-produced goods that can never be forged into such a beautiful blade. Testing out the sharpness, it could easily be used for shaving, and after thinking about how the previous owner must have cherished it, he let out a sigh again. The previous owner was a white South African man who was Gao Yang's hunting group's tour guide, and during the flight, he even chatted with him regarding it. Who would have thought the knife would have ultimately ended up in his hands? He was sad that he was the only one that survived, but was thankful for his luck. When everyone was selecting seats before takeoff, they all avoided the uncomfortable tail area, but Gao Yang chose the tail because he knew it was the safest part. And apart from good luck, this was the other reason why he survived. He shook his head, trying to force himself to stop thinking of useless things. He fished out his compass and was astonished to find the sun was located to the west, indicating it was currently the afternoon. Gao Yang's plane had left around this time period, meaning that he had been unconscious for a whole 24 hours. He didn't know how far he floated in those 24 hours, but he knew that the farther he drifted away from the crash site, the less of a chance he'd get rescued. Another impending issue now was the sky was currently dark. Thanks to shows like Animal Planet and Man vs. Wild, he had an understanding of how terrifying the plains were at night, and he didn't want to linger any longer. He struggled to get back to his feet. His best option was to seek shelter or at least make a campfire before it got even darker. The riverbank had tons of washed-up branches that were dry, making it a quick task to gather. He first found a sufficient-length stick to act as his crutch, and then gathered as many dry branches as possible to prepare for the first night in the African plains. And while doing his tasks, he didn't forget to take note of any sounds from all 4 directions. He had to be on guard against many things, and since it was currently in the middle of the rainy season, the grass in the plains were very long and luscious. If one did not wish to be suddenly attacked by a wild beast, one had to be vigilant. He decided to camp out further away from the riverbank to avoid any beasts that might approach the water for a drink. Being away from the riverbank also would protect him in case there was a sudden increase in the water level, and during the rainy season, even if there was no rainfall, it was normal for flash floods to occur, which would exponentially increase the downstream river currents. His plan was to first find shelter for the night, and then forage for food the next day. With his fishing hook and line, since he still had them, there was a high chance for catching fish. As long as there was food, he'd be able to survive a couple days, and while waiting for his knee to recover, he could send signals for help, and hopefully be rescued. If no one came, he could wait to recover and then create a wooden raft and sail down the current. He firmly believed that there would definitely be people who lived near the river. The only problem was how far. With his essential survival items, he had faith in staying alive. However, It seemed like the heavens were adamant in opposing him. Just when Gao Yang was using the paracord to make a bundle of firewood, while heading towards his camp, he suddenly heard a loud gunshot. And that was A Mercenary's War, Chapter 1. If you enjoyed it, please hit the links down below and give it the rest a read. Hopefully Gao Yang makes it out alive. If you enjoy my stuff, please share it about. Read the Gravity Tales. Just share it all. This is how these things get bigger and better. And Gravity Tales, I'm actually enjoying. I'm reading their stuff right now. It gives you a lot of different perspectives as writing. It gives me a lot of ideas. It's always fun to see how other people do it. So definitely a good thing to do. Anyway, have fun. Ta-ta for now.